lot about the themes of hip-hop and cinema through this course. Not only has hip-hop shaped and reflected the complex social issues of its time, it has created a cultural movement that is just as much about resistance and change as it is about artistic expression and personal survival. The first theme regarding hip-hop that I found to be important is drugs and how drugs have impacted the upbringing of hip-hop. The first drug that I found to be prevalent in the upbringing of hip-hop is heroin. Heroin was a product of after-hours partying, and most bebop artists were addicted. This drug mostly impacted only men and was only used by men. Charlie Parker was a very popular artist at the time, and he died due to a heroin overdose at the age of 34 in 1955. People used heroin to try and create music like him. They thought that they would be better artists if they were using, and this caused a very big problem. Detroit Red went to prison for heroin hustling and then later converted to Islamism and was better known as Malcolm X. Malcolm X, his upbringing story of finding a better life was inspiring to hip hop and black culture because he was initially a drug hustler, but then he found a better outlet. He was very involved activist that stood for black rights and was mentioned in many songs such as No Sellout, New Malcolm X, Fight the Power, and Memory Lane. The second drug that I found to be prevalent in the upbringing of hip-hop was cocaine. Cocaine gained traction in the 1970s as heroin use declined. It was used by men and women this time, which was very different from heroin. Cocaine use began in Miami because Miami was a smallly populated area for retirement and had little crime. But then this all changed when cocaine was introduced into the economy. The increase in cocaine use turned Miami into a fast-paced city with a thriving economy, all because dealers made a ton of money and bought expensive cars and property. Cocaine use also skyrocketed because celebrities used it as an appetite suppressant since pressure was high to look good on camera in this era. Furthermore, Ricky Ross invented crack, which was a smokable cocaine. This was revolutionary because it was easier and better to use. The Ready Rock cocaine was made with baking soda, which was easier and cheaper to smoke. This introduced the working class to cocaine, which was a huge change that we hadn't seen before because this allowed normal people to use drugs when it used to be just the super rich and privileged people. Ricky Ross saw selling crack as his way out of poverty, and he later talked about this in many of his songs, which was very important in the upbringing of hip-hop. Another important theme that we covered in this class was how hip-hop was very politically influential. People began to speculate that hip-hop was this generation's form of politics. Artists like KRS-One and Public Enemy influenced society more than politicians ever had. Hip-hop being a crucial outfit for black politics, especially from 1987 to 1993 when police brutality and racial discrimination were very prominent. Spike Lee and Chuck D were the most quoted black activists who were really just artists in the nation during this time. Rodney King was beaten to death by 4 LA police officers due to his speeding, and all 4 officers were acquitted, and this started a riot where over 50 people ended up dying. This was important because hip-hop artists started talking about it in their songs and bringing attention to the often overlooked issue of police brutality. Another instance, Michael Stewart was arrested for making graffiti when he was beaten on site and died 13 days later, and all 6 officers were acquitted. And when the officers left the courtroom, they were heckled by about 100 protesters. This caused black artists to speak out through music, and this started with Fuck the Police by NWA. Police brutality was a very prominent issue in this time, and yet it was very under-broadcasted, so NWA took it to their platform to fight for equality. This song also empowered black people to speak out against the government for the first time. The harsh language and the title of the song alone was a very shocking thing, and it drew a lot of attention to the artist group and to the song. The controversial song forced a lot of people to talk about the subject. Although we didn't talk about it in class, I think it's important to discuss the popularization of explicit material in the upbringing of hip-hop. Hip-hop was unlike any other music genre in its upbringing in the sense that the explicit content was shocking. The explicit content was great marketing for the genre because people were so intrigued at what these artists were rapping about in their songs. For example, street life, drugs, violence, and even sex. The breach of many taboo subjects drew a ton of attention to the music since people had never heard anything like it before. 2 Live Crew was arrested for their very explicit album, Nasty As They Wanna Be, in 1989. This case gained massive media attention and ultimately led to national debates regarding freedom of speech in music. 2 Live Crew wanted to portray how explicit material is a part of their culture and it should be talked about and expressed. The success of this trial and the traction the media gave this album left Two Live Crew profiting from the scandal and influenced other artists to produce more explicit material themselves. Furthermore, the parental advisory label was born after the scandal and it was put on albums that were deemed explicit. These albums sold better because the listeners got a sense of satisfaction from buying and listening to forbidden content. The next part of hip hop that I think is important to talk about, but we didn't talk about in class, is hip hop's nuanced relationship with crime. Hip hop has been commonly criticized as glorifying crime, but the relationship between the two is much more complex than that. Rappers often use their lyrics to show that crime was unfortunately a part of survival when they were growing up. Many talk about drugs and gangs in a way that shows there was no choice, but it was crucial in keeping their life. The term hustler was also very commonly used in hip hop at the time, and it was referring to someone who sells drugs. Hip hop tends to romanticize the hustler, but this is due to the person's resilience and determination to do whatever it takes to get out of poverty, not necessarily the fact that they were breaking the law. Hip hop has also critiqued crime in the sense that it is a reflection of economic status and therefore bringing the bigger issue to light, poverty. Going deeper into this, Public Enemy's track Fight the Power counters the systemic oppression that forces individuals into lives of crime and violence. And to finish up, here are the sources that I used to conduct my research. I've learned a lot about the themes of hip hop and cinema throughout this course, but most importantly, I found that hip hop shaped and reflected the complex social issues of its time. Not only has it created a cultural movement, but it has shown the resistance and change about artistic oppression and personal survival.